Hello, and welcome to The Sleepy Mind. Tonight, we are going to spend some time with something that has been happening all around you and inside you for every moment of your life. Something so constant, so woven into the fabric of things that it tends to disappear into the background the way breathing disappears, the way the sound of a familiar room disappears. You stop noticing it not because it has gone quiet, but because you have simply grown accustomed to its presence. Change is not an event. It is not the thing that happens when the job ends, or the season turns, or the face in the mirror looks somehow different from the one you remember. Those moments are only the places where change becomes visible, the way a river only becomes visible where it surfaces from underground. Beneath them, beneath every ordinary hour of every ordinary day, the river has always been running. It is, in many ways, one of the most paradoxical forces in existence. Change is the one thing that never changes. It is present in the star that burns for 1 billion years and in the thought that lasts 3 seconds. It is present in the cell that lives for a week and in the mountain that takes 10 million years to rise. It asks nothing of us. It does not require our participation or our consent. It simply continues, patient and unhurried, with or without our attention. And yet there is something about turning that attention toward change, looking at it slowly and carefully, that tends to produce something unexpected. Not anxiety, not the restless feeling that nothing can be held. Something closer to its opposite. A kind of stillness that comes from recognizing at last that you are already inside the current, that you have always been inside it, that there is nowhere else to be. If these quiet journeys into sleep are something you find yourself returning to, I would love for you to like this video or subscribe to The Sleepy Mind. It helps more tired and curious people find their way here, one gentle evening at a time. But for now, there is nothing you need to do with any of this. Let your body settle into wherever it is resting. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands release whatever they have been holding, and let your breath find its own pace, slow and even, without any effort from you at all. We are going somewhere unhurried tonight, somewhere the river moves at exactly the right speed. Let us begin. There is a word in the Pali language, the ancient tongue preserved by the Theravada Buddhist tradition with extraordinary care across more than 2,000 years, that does not translate easily into English. The word is anicca. It is usually rendered as impermanence, and that is a reasonable enough approximation, the way a photograph of a landscape is a reasonable approximation of the landscape itself. But something in the word resists containment. Something in it is wider than any single translation can hold. Anicca is not simply the observation that things change. It is not the mild philosophical note that seasons come and go, or that people age, or that what we build eventually crumbles. It is something more fundamental than that, and something more intimate. It is the recognition that change is not an event that happens to things. It is one of the essential characteristics of all conditioned phenomena, meaning everything that arises through causes and conditions, everything that can be seen or felt or thought or known. Change is not an interruption to existence. In the Theravada understanding, it is among the defining qualities of existence itself. The Buddhist tradition places anicca alongside 2 other marks of all conditioned experience. The first is dukkha, a word that is most often translated as suffering, but carries a far more nuanced meaning. Something closer to the quality of unsatisfactoriness that runs through experience when one tries to hold on to what cannot be held. The second is anatta, the recognition that what we take to be a fixed and continuous self is itself a process rather than a thing, a flowing rather than a standing. These three marks, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self, are understood in Theravada teaching not as doctrines to be accepted on faith, but as qualities to be directly observed in the texture of one's own experience. What is remarkable about this is the instruction that follows. The practitioner is not asked to think about impermanence. They are asked to watch it, to sit quietly and notice, in real time, the arising and passing of sensations in the body, the coming and going of sounds, the brief life of a thought from its first appearance to its dissolution. The specific stage of insight in which this direct observation becomes vivid is described in Pali as udaya baya nana, meaning the knowledge of arising and passing away. It is considered a significant turning point in the development of insight, the moment when impermanence stops being an idea and becomes something the meditator can actually feel. The Zen tradition holds its own relationship with this understanding, expressed not primarily in doctrine, but in poetry and image. The Japanese word mujo, meaning impermanence or transience, runs through classical Japanese literature like a quiet current beneath all other currents. It appears in the haiku of Matsuo Basho, who spent much of his life traveling and writing, finding in the most fleeting of things, a frog entering a pond, a crow settling on a bare branch in autumn, the sound of the wind moving through pines, something that was both temporary and perfect precisely because it was temporary. To encounter mujo in a poem is not to be saddened by the fact of change. It is to be asked to look more carefully at what is here right now before it is not. In Tibetan Buddhism, this teaching is given perhaps its most striking physical form. Monks trained in the intricate art of sand mandala construction will work for days, sometimes weeks, to create an elaborate circular diagram using millions of individual grains of colored sand, placed with extraordinary precision, using thin metal funnels. The finished mandala can be breathtaking in its complexity and its beauty. And then, when it is complete, it is destroyed. The monks gather around it, recite prayers, and sweep the sand together. All those days of careful labor and color and geometric precision into an undifferentiated pile. That pile is then poured into a nearby body of water, not as an act of waste, as a teaching, as a demonstration performed with full ceremony and intention that the most beautiful and carefully constructed things are still impermanent, and that this recognition, when truly absorbed, is not a cause for grief, but for a kind of freedom. The Mahayana tradition extends this understanding even further through the teaching of sunyata, usually translated as emptiness. Emptiness does not mean nothingness. It means that things lack fixed, independent, permanent existence. The flower is not a fixed thing that then changes. It is a process, a temporary convergence of soil and water and sunlight and seed and time that appears to be a thing and is always already in the process of becoming something else. Change, in this teaching, is not something that happens to things from the outside. It is woven into what things are, all the way down. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki, who brought Zen practice to the United States in the latter half of the 20th century, described the practice of beginner's mind, or shoshin in Japanese, as the capacity to approach each moment as though for the first time, without the overlays of habit and assumption and prior knowledge that ordinarily mediate experience. In beginner's mind, the moment is not filtered through the mind's extensive archive of what moments like this one usually contain. It is met fresh. And to meet anything fresh, without the weight of accumulated expectation, is to become available to the particular quality of this moment, which will not be repeated. It is, quietly, a practice of honoring impermanence by actually inhabiting it. All of these teachings, from the Pali forests of ancient India to the scroll paintings of medieval Japan, to the ceremonial sand and color of the Tibetan tradition, circle the same recognition. That impermanence is not the problem. The problem is the wish that things were otherwise. And the beginning of ease is the simple, patient act of noticing what is actually here as it actually is, for as long as it lasts. That noticing, repeated across mornings and evenings and the long middle hours of ordinary days, is what the practice is asking for. Not drama, not renunciation, just this, and this, and this. And now, from the intimacy of these ancient contemplative traditions, we move outward into the broader river of human thought, where the question of change had been asked and asked again across every civilization that has ever wondered what the world is made of. Long before anyone had the tools to measure the rate at which a glacier moves or observe the reorganization of a single neuron, human beings were already sitting with the question of change, turning it slowly, pressing it from different angles, arguing about what it meant and whether it was real. The history of philosophy is, among other things, a very long conversation about what stays the same and what does not, and what the relationship is between the two. One of the earliest voices in that conversation belongs to a Greek philosopher named Heraclitus, who lived on the coast of what is now Turkey, sometime around the 5th century, before the Common Era. Very little of his writing has survived intact, only fragments, but those fragments carry an unusual density of thought, as though each sentence were the compression of something much larger. Heraclitus held that everything is in continuous flux, that the fundamental nature of reality is not rest, but flowing. The statement most often attributed to him, that one cannot step into the same river twice, is a particularly precise encapsulation of what he meant. The river you step into now is not the river you stepped into before, because the water has moved on. But more than that, the person stepping is also not quite the same person who stepped before. Both the river and the one entering it have changed between any two encounters. The observation holds at every scale. Almost at the same historical moment, a philosopher named Parmenides was arriving at what appears to be the opposite conclusion. Parmenides argued that true reality is unchanging and eternal, that the world of appearances in which things seem to come and go is a kind of illusion produced by the limitations of the senses. What truly is, he insisted, simply is, without beginning, without ending, without transformation. Change, in this view, is something the senses report, but reason cannot ultimately justify. The tension between these two positions, the philosopher of flux and the philosopher of permanence, turns out to be enormously generative. Between them, they opened a question that Western philosophy has been working on ever since. Aristotle, working in the 4th century before the Common Era, tried to hold both ends of this tension with his characteristic precision. He distinguished 4 types of change: change in substance, the coming into being or ceasing to be of a thing; change in quality, as when something shifts from one condition to another; change in quantity, as when something grows or diminishes; and change in place or position. What runs through all 4 types, in Aristotle's analysis, is the relationship between potentiality and actuality. A seed has the potential to become a tree. When it becomes a tree, that potential has been actualized. Change, for Aristotle, is the movement from what something can be toward what it is. It is always directed, always moving from somewhere towards somewhere, even if the destination is dissolution. In Chinese philosophy, particularly in Taoist thought, the question of change is approached from a different direction entirely. The Tao Te Ching, traditionally attributed to a sage named Laozi and compiled sometime in the 4th or 3rd century before the Common Era, does not analyze change so much as invite the reader into a different relationship with it. The Tao, the way, is often described as the source and pattern of all things, and it is characterized by continuous flow and transformation. Resistance to this flow, the insistence on holding what is already moving, produces difficulty. Ease comes from moving with the current rather than against it. This is not passivity, it is a particular kind of attentiveness, a willingness to feel which way things are actually going and to participate in that direction rather than impose a separate one. The Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome, among them Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, worked with a related distinction that has proven remarkably durable: the difference between what is within our power to influence and what is not. The Stoic practice was to direct effort, care, and attention only toward what one could genuinely affect, and to meet everything outside that circle with equanimity. This was not a counsel of indifference to the world, but a counsel of precision. To spend energy resisting what cannot be changed is to lose twice, once to the change itself, and once to the struggle against it. What remains when that struggle is released is not emptiness, but something like clarity. The I Ching, the Book of Changes, is among the oldest of the Chinese classic texts, and one of the oldest books still in continuous use anywhere in the world. It is organized entirely around the theme of change, its 64 hexagrams each describing a particular moment or pattern of transition in the endless cycling of circumstances. For more than 2,000 years, people have consulted it not to find out what will happen, but to understand what kind of moment they are in, what qualities the current change is calling for, what posture of response the situation asks of. It treats change not as a problem to be solved, but as a landscape to be navigated with wisdom. And it holds that wisdom is largely a matter of reading the terrain accurately and moving accordingly. Charles Darwin, working in the 19th century in a very different register from any of these philosophers, provided what became one of the most consequential demonstrations in human intellectual history that change, operating without plan or intention over enormous spans of time, could produce staggering complexity and diversity. The theory of natural selection, published in On the Origin of Species in 1859, showed that small, undirected variations accumulating across generations those variations that happen to confer some advantage being more likely to persist, could account for the extraordinary variety of life on Earth. It did not require a designer. It required only variation, time, and the quiet pressure of circumstance. Change, in this view, is not a disruption to the order of things. It is how order arises in the first place. From the long arc of human thought, turning and returning to the question of what changes and what endures, we move now into the world that does not need philosophy to demonstrate its nature. The natural world is already showing us, in its own patient and unhurried way, what change looks like from the inside. There is a cross-section of a tree trunk on display in a natural history museum in California, taken from a giant sequoia that was several thousand years old when it fell. Someone has marked certain rings with small labels. This ring was laid down when a particular dynasty rose in China. This one when a cathedral was begun in Europe. This one when a war ended. The tree was growing through all of it, quietly and without knowledge of any of it, adding one ring of wood each year, recording in its body the particular conditions of each particular year. A narrow ring for a dry year, a wide one for a year of abundant rain. The entire history of the tree is there in the wood, if you know how to read it. Trees in temperate climates do not grow at a constant rate throughout the year. The process accelerates sharply in spring, when warming temperatures and lengthening days signal the cambium, the thin layer of actively dividing cells just beneath the bark, to begin producing new wood. Growth slows through summer, decelerates further in autumn, and approaches near stillness in winter. The boundary between one year's growth and the next shows up as a distinct line in the wood, the edge of one season pressing against the beginning of another. Each ring is both a record and a small monument. This is what the year was. This is what the tree held in its body when it was done. What autumn does to a tree is not what most people imagine it to be. It is easy to think of the changing colors of leaves as a kind of fading, a dying away of the greens that summer held. But the yellows and oranges that appear in autumn were present in the leaf all along, running quietly beneath the dominant green of chlorophyll throughout the growing season. As the days shorten and temperatures cool, the tree begins to seal off the connection at the base of each leaf, preparing to release it. As chlorophyll breaks down, the green recedes, and what was always there, the yellow xanthophylls and the orange carotenoids, becomes visible for the first time. The color was not created by the dyeing, it was revealed by it. The reds and purples that appear in certain species tell a slightly different story. These are anthocyanins, pigments that are actively produced fresh in autumn, manufactured by the tree as sugars become trapped in the leaf after the seal has formed. Exactly why trees produce these pigments at the cost of energy at the very end of a leaf's life is still not entirely settled in the scientific literature. Some researchers suggest the red coloration protects the leaf during the reabsorption of nutrients, shielding it briefly from intense light, while useful materials are drawn back into the tree. Whatever the mechanism, the result is the same: a brief, intense flare of color at the moment of letting go. Rivers, too, are always in the process of becoming something different from what they were. The process called meandering, in which a river gradually shifts its course across a floodplain, is one of the most elegant demonstrations in nature of how change works over time. Slowly, continuously and in ways that are invisible day to day, but dramatic across decades. As water flows around a bend in a river, it moves fastest on the outside of the curve, eroding the bank there, and most slowly on the inside, depositing sediment. The bend deepens, the outer bank retreats, the inner bank builds outward. Over years and centuries, the river loops and curves, and sometimes cuts entirely across the neck of a meander, leaving an oxbow lake, a crescent of still water that was once part of the flowing river and is now separated from it entirely. The river remembers its old path in that quiet shape of water, and then, slowly, the oxbow fills with silt and becomes a wetland, and then eventually dry land, and the old path disappears. Bamboo grows faster than any other woody plant on Earth. Certain species of the giant moso bamboo, given the right conditions of warmth and moisture, can extend by close to a meter in a single day. This is not growth that one can see from moment to moment, but if you were to mark a culm, a bamboo stem, at dawn and return to it at dusk, you would find it measurably taller. The growth happens mostly at night, in long pulses, the cells of the new shoot elongating rapidly in the dark. There is something quietly remarkable about that. The most extraordinary growth occurring in stillness, in the hours when the visible world has gone to rest. The Sahara, which now covers much of North Africa as the largest hot desert on Earth, was not always what it is today. Between approximately 6,000 and 11,000 years ago, during what geologists call the African humid period, the region received substantially more rainfall, fed by changes in Earth's orbital position that altered the distribution of solar energy reaching the planet's surface. The Sahara of that time supported lakes, rivers, grasslands, and extensive human settlement. Rock art found in what are now some of the most inhospitable landscapes on Earth shows images of cattle, hippopotamuses, crocodiles, and people fishing and swimming. Entire civilizations rose and fell there, and then the climate shifted, the rains retreated, and the green world gave way to the one we know now. The desert, from its own perspective, is not permanent. It is just the current chapter. Glaciers are often described as though they were frozen, as though the very essence of a glacier was stillness. But glaciers move. They flow under their own immense weight, ice crystals deforming and sliding along planes of weakness, the mass of the glacier advancing slowly toward lower ground. Most glaciers advance only centimeters to meters per day, a pace so slow as to be invisible without time-lapse observation. And yet the effects accumulate. Glaciers have carved the fjords of Norway, the valleys of the Alps, the great U-shaped channels that define entire landscapes. The stillness is not stillness, it is slowness, which, given enough time, amounts to the same thing as movement. In the depths of certain caves, formations called stalactites descend from the ceiling, and stalagmites rise from the floor, growing toward each other with a patience that makes everything else described here seem rushed. These formations grow as mineral-laden water seeps through the rock above, deposits a tiny quantity of calcite, and then evaporates or drips away. The rate of growth is typically measured in tenths of a millimeter to a few millimeters per year. Large formations found in some of the world's older caves have been growing for hundreds of thousands of years. They hold, in their layered mineral structure, a record of every season and every variation in rainfall and temperature that occurred while they were forming. They are, in their own way, the most patient historians on Earth. From the patience of caves and the speed of bamboo and the slow turning of rivers, we move now into the place where change is most immediate, most personal, most unavoidable. The body that is carrying you through this very night. The body that you inhabit right now is not the same body you inhabited a year ago. This is not a metaphor or a philosophical observation. It is a description of something that is happening continuously, at the cellular level, in the quiet interior of every tissue and organ. The body is not a fixed structure that accumulates wear over time. It is a process, a sustained act of continuous renewal, replacing itself according to schedules that vary by tissue and function, but never quite stop. Consider the lining of the stomach. Those cells are in contact with hydrochloric acid every time food is digested, an environment so corrosive that the cells cannot survive it for long. The stomach protects itself through rapid replacement, turning over the cells of its lining roughly every 2 to 9 days, depending on the specific layer and the individual. The stomach you are digesting tonight's last meal in is not the stomach that digested last week's. It has been substantially rebuilt in the interval. Red blood cells are made in the bone marrow and released into the bloodstream, where they carry oxygen throughout the body for approximately 120 days before being broken down in the spleen and replaced. The body produces roughly 2 million new red blood cells every second. 2 million every second, quietly and without announcement, in the soft darkness inside the bones. This production is precisely calibrated to match the rate of loss, so that the total number of red blood cells in circulation remains essentially constant, even as every individual cell is cycling through its brief, useful life. Bone feels permanent, hard and enduring and structural, and yet it is one of the most continuously active tissues in the body. The process called bone remodeling involves 2 types of specialized cells working in coordination: osteoclasts, which dissolve old or damaged bone tissue, and osteoblasts, which lay down new bone in its place. This is not a repair process that occurs only in response to injury. It is continuous throughout life, a constant conversation between breakdown and rebuilding that keeps bone responsive to the mechanical demands placed on it and allows it to repair microscopic damage before it accumulates. The estimated time for the entire adult skeleton to be replaced through this process is approximately 10 years. The bones you are resting on now are not the bones that were there a decade ago. The skin does something similar on a faster time scale. The outermost layer, the stratum corneum, is composed of cells that have already completed their life cycle and are gradually shed from the surface, replaced by cells rising from deeper layers beneath. The entire outer skin renews itself approximately every 2 to 3 weeks. The skin that you feel right now, the particular texture of it against whatever surface you are lying on, is not the skin that was there a month ago. Beneath the surface, new cells are already forming and beginning their slow migration upward toward the light. Even the tongue participates in this constant renewal. Taste buds, the small sensory organs embedded in the papillae of the tongue, are replaced roughly every 10 days. They are among the fastest renewing sensory structures in the body, which is why the temporary loss of taste that sometimes accompanies illness tends to return within a week or 2 as the new buds form. The taste you experience tonight is carried by structures that were not there 2 weeks ago. The body's core temperature follows a daily rhythm that most people never consciously notice, but that governs an enormous range of physiological processes. Temperature reaches its lowest point in the early morning hours, around 4 in the morning, and its peak in the late afternoon, around 4 to 6 in the evening. This cycle, which persists even in people who have been isolated from all external time cues, reflects the body's internal circadian clock, an ancient biological system that coordinates the timing of metabolism, hormone release, immune function, and cellular repair across the 24-hour cycle. The body you are in at midnight is operating differently from the body you inhabited at 4 in the afternoon. The lenses of the eyes hold a particular kind of change within them. Unlike most cells in the body, lens cells are never shed. They accumulate over a lifetime, each new layer of cells laid down over the previous ones, like the rings of a tree, so that the innermost cells of the lens were formed before birth and have been there ever since. This lifelong accumulation is what causes the lens to gradually stiffen and lose its flexibility over the decades, making the close focus that was effortless at 20 progressively more difficult at 40 and 50. The lens holds the entire history of the life it has been part of, all of it, every year, compressed into a small, transparent disc behind the pupil. The brain reaches its maximum volume somewhere in the mid to late 20s, after which it very gradually decreases in size, at an estimated rate of roughly 1/5% per year. This is not the catastrophic decline it might sound like. Much of what happens in the aging brain is a matter of reorganization rather than simple loss. As circuits are refined, unnecessary connections are pruned, and experience is consolidated. The older brain is not simply a smaller version of the younger one. It is a different instrument, tuned by decades of use toward different qualities. And it is in the living organ of the brain, plastic and responsive to experience in ways that researchers are still unraveling, that some of the most astonishing dimensions of change in the human body can be found. For most of the 20th century, the prevailing view in neuroscience was that the adult brain was essentially fixed. The childhood years were understood as a critical window during which connections were formed and neural architecture established, and after which the brain's fundamental structure became more or less permanent. Learning and memory could occur in adults, of course, but the underlying wiring, the physical structure of the brain itself, was thought to be largely set. This turned out to be wrong. The accumulated research of recent decades has established something far more remarkable: that the brain retains a capacity for structural and functional change throughout the entire lifespan. The name for this capacity is neuroplasticity, and it describes the brain's ability to reorganize itself in response to experience, forming new connections, strengthening heavily used pathways, pruning underused ones, and in some cases even reorganizing its functional geography following injury. When you learn something new, whether a language, an instrument, a route through a city, or a way of thinking about a problem, your brain does not simply record the new information the way a file is saved to a hard drive. It physically changes. New synaptic connections form between neurons, and those connections are strengthened through repetition through a cellular process called long-term potentiation, in which the synaptic junction between two neurons becomes more efficient each time it is used. Use a pathway, and it becomes easier to use. Leave it unused and it weakens, eventually being pruned away to free resources for more active circuits. The brain is, in a quite literal sense, shaped by what you do with it. The research on London taxi drivers remains one of the most striking demonstrations of this principle. In London, prospective taxi drivers are required by licensing regulations to pass an extraordinarily demanding test of spatial knowledge, the memorization of thousands of streets, landmarks, routes, and points of interest across the entire city. This body of knowledge, known as the knowledge, typically takes several years of intensive study to acquire and is considered one of the most cognitively demanding licensing examinations in the world. Neuroimaging studies of experienced London taxi drivers found that the posterior hippocampus, a region of the brain associated with spatial navigation and memory, was measurably larger in the drivers than in comparable non-drivers, and that the size of the enlargement correlated with the length of time the driver had been working. The physical structure of the brain had been altered by what the brain had been asked to do. Long-term meditation practice appears to have measurable effects on brain structure as well. Studies of experienced meditators, people who have practiced for years or decades, have found greater cortical thickness in regions associated with attention, interoception, the awareness of internal bodily states, and sensory processing. These are not subtle or marginal findings. They suggest that the sustained practice of directing and sustaining attention, done consistently over years, leaves a physical record in the brain. The practice changes not only what the mind does, but what the brain is. Memory, that most intimate form of learning, is consolidated during sleep, a finding that has become one of the most reliably replicated in cognitive neuroscience. During sleep, particularly during the deeper slow-wave stages, the brain transfers information from short-term storage in the hippocampus to more durable long-term storage in the cortex, a process of consolidation that cements the traces of the day's learning into more stable and accessible form. Sleep deprivation impairs this consolidation, which is why the person who stays up all night to study for an examination often retains less than the person who studied less but slept well. The prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain associated with planning, decision-making, impulse regulation, and the assessment of long-term consequences, is among the last brain areas to reach full maturity. It does not complete its development until the mid-20s, later than almost any other brain region. This fact has a quietly important implication. The capacity to fully weigh the long-term consequences of decisions, to modulate impulse in the service of future goals, to hold multiple options in mind and reason carefully between them, is still developing well into early adulthood. The adolescent and young adult brain is not a deficient version of the mature brain. It is a brain in the midst of an important and extended renovation. Grief is a form of change in the brain as well as in the life. Acute grief activates brain regions associated with physical pain, including the anterior cingulate cortex, which may partly explain why the loss of someone deeply loved carries a quality that is not merely metaphorically painful, but genuinely felt in the body. Working memory, concentration, and emotional regulation are all temporarily diminished in the early stages of grief, as the brain's resources are directed toward processing an experience of enormous magnitude. The brain is reorganizing itself around an absence that has changed everything it knew about the landscape of connection and care. Crucially, when a habit changes, the original neural pathway is not erased. New pathways are formed that compete with and, when consistently used, increasingly override the old ones. But the old pathway remains dormant and available. This is why old habits can resurface with unexpected ease during periods of stress, fatigue, or distraction, when the newer, more effortful pathway requires more resources than are currently available, and the older, more automatic one slips back into use. Understanding this does not make change harder. It makes it more honest, and it suggests that kindness toward one's own lapses is not indulgence, but accuracy. The old path is still there. The work is simply to keep choosing the new one again and again until it becomes the one the brain reaches for first. From the living architecture of the brain, where every experience leaves a trace, we move now into the territory of memory itself, that most personal and most mutable record of the life that has been lived. What if memory were not a library, but a conversation? Not a collection of fixed records that are stored and then retrieved intact, but a dynamic process of continuous reconstruction in which each act of remembering is also, unavoidably, an act of slight revision. This is, in essence, what the past several decades of memory research have demonstrated, and it changes everything about how we understand the relationship between the past and the present. Human memory is not a recording. It does not preserve experience the way a camera preserves an image or a recorder preserves a sound. It preserves a kind of neural trace, a pattern of activation that can be reactivated under the right conditions. But the reactivation is not a playback. It is a reconstruction, assembled in the moment of remembering from that original trace, but also from everything else the person currently knows, feels, expects, and believes. The memory is real. The experience it refers to was real. But the memory, as it exists in the present moment, is colored and shaped by the present moment in ways that are not usually visible to the person doing the remembering. The process by which a recalled memory temporarily becomes unstable, susceptible to modification by new information or strong emotion, before being restored in its updated form, is called reconsolidation. When you remember something, the memory is briefly taken off the shelf, so to speak, and during that brief window, it is not fixed. New information encountered while the memory is active can be incorporated into it. The experience of remembering can itself alter what is remembered. The memory is then restored, not quite in its original form. This is not a flaw in the system. It may be part of how the brain keeps memories relevant and updated, integrating new understanding into old experience, rather than maintaining a rigid archive that cannot be revised in light of what has since been learned. Childhood amnesia, the near-universal finding that most people have few or no explicit memories from the first 3 or 4 years of their lives, offers a particular window into the relationship between memory and the developing brain. The hippocampus, which is essential for the formation of explicit long-term memories, is still in the early stages of its development during infancy and early childhood. The infant is having experiences, rich and vivid experiences, but the neural infrastructure required to encode them as retrievable autobiographical memories is not yet in place. The earliest years of a life leave their marks through patterns of attachment, through emotional responses, through the particular way the nervous system learned to orient itself in the world. But they do not leave the kind of explicit narrative memory that can be consciously recalled. The foundation is there. The record is not. As people age, the types of memory that are most affected differ in ways that are both predictable and in some ways counterintuitive. Episodic memory, the memory for specific personal events, a particular conversation, the first time one visited a particular city, the feeling of a specific afternoon from a summer long past, tends to decline more noticeably with age than semantic memory, which is the general knowledge and understanding of the world that accumulates over a lifetime. An older person may find it more difficult to remember the occasion on which they first encountered a piece of music, but their knowledge of the music itself, its history, its structure, its emotional register, remains fully intact. Experience and knowledge do not travel at the same rate into the past. Flashbulb memories are what psychologists call the vivid, highly detailed memories that people form during moments of intense emotional significance, typically unexpected events of major public or personal consequence. These memories feel unusually clear and complete, as though the brain had taken a high-resolution photograph of the moment. But research has consistently found that despite their subjective vividness, flashbulb memories are not necessarily more accurate than ordinary memories. They are more confidently held, more frequently rehearsed and retold, and more strongly felt. But the details they contain are no more reliable, and sometimes less reliable, than the details of more mundane memories. Confidence and accuracy, it turns out, are different things. The relationship between scent and memory is unlike any other sensory connection in the human brain. The olfactory system, which processes smell, connects more directly to the hippocampus and the amygdala than any other. Sensory modality, bypassing the thalamic relay that other senses pass through. This anatomical directness may be why a scent can trigger a memory with a sudden, vivid, almost physical force that visual or auditory cues rarely achieve. The smell of a particular wood or flower or kitchen spice can collapse decades in an instant, transporting the person not just to the memory, but briefly into the emotional texture of it, the way the light felt, the sense of the time of day, the particular quality of being young in a specific place. The past, which felt entirely gone, turns out to have been there all along, waiting in the particular shape of a molecule, patient as stone. From memory, that extraordinary and imperfect record of the lives we have lived, we turn now toward the nightly transition that shapes and reshapes it all, the passage into sleep and back again, through which every human life is continuously changed. Every night, without planning it and without choosing it, you undergo one of the most profound transitions the human nervous system is capable of. Wakefulness, with all its directed activity and continuous narration and the particular effort of being a self in the world, gives way to something else entirely. Consciousness does not simply turn off. It transforms, moving through a sequence of stages that are as distinct from each other as they are from waking, each one with its own characteristic brain activity, its own particular quality of experience, its own contribution to the body's ongoing process of renewal. The stages of sleep cycle through the night in a roughly 90-minute pattern, but the character of each cycle shifts across the hours of sleep. In the earlier part of the night, slow wave sleep, the deepest and most physically restorative stage, dominates. The brain produces long, synchronized electrical waves. Growth hormone is released, and the immune system is active. As the night progresses, REM sleep, the stage associated with vivid dreaming, becomes longer and more prominent. By the final cycles before natural waking, REM may account for most of the 90-minute period. The architecture of a full night's sleep is not uniform. It is a structure that changes as it unfolds, weighted differently at different hours, offering different forms of restoration at different moments in the night. The body's circadian rhythm, the internal clock that runs on an approximately 24-hour cycle, is one of the most ancient biological systems in existence, predating humans by billions of years. Single-celled organisms have it. Plants have it. The circadian system coordinates the timing of metabolism, hormone release, cellular repair, and countless other processes, aligning them with the cycle of light and dark. But this internal clock is not static across a human lifetime. Teenagers experience a biological delay in their sleep and wake timing, driven by hormonal changes that shift the circadian rhythm toward later hours. Their bodies are genuinely not ready for sleep at 10 in the evening or for wakefulness at 6 in the morning, not because of habit or preference, but because of the particular biology of that developmental stage. Older adults often shift in the opposite direction, toward earlier sleep and earlier waking. The clock is always running, but where it sets, the alarm changes over the decades. Melatonin, the hormone synthesized by the pineal gland in the brain, and often called the darkness hormone, begins to rise in the bloodstream in the early evening as the level of light in the environment falls. It reaches its peak sometime in the middle of the night and declines before the natural waking time. This rise signals to virtually every tissue in the body that the dark hours have arrived and that the processes associated with nighttime should begin. Artificial light at night, particularly the short wavelength blue light emitted by electronic screens, suppresses this rise, delaying the body's preparation for sleep. The body's ancient response to the change from light to dark, a response calibrated over millions of years, meets the comparatively very recent invention of the illuminated screen. And the ancient response does not always win. During sleep, a system in the brain that was not described in the scientific literature until 2012 becomes highly active. The glymphatic system uses the flow of cerebrospinal fluid through channels surrounding the brain's blood vessels to flush metabolic waste products from brain tissue. During waking, when the brain is metabolically active, these waste products accumulate. During sleep, when the brain's cells appear to shrink slightly, creating larger channels for the fluid to flow through, the clearance is dramatically more efficient. Among the substances cleared during sleep are proteins whose accumulation has been associated with neurodegenerative disease. Sleep is not, it turns out, merely a rest from the day. It is an active maintenance process, a nightly washing out of what the day left behind. The discovery of REM sleep in 1953 by Nathaniel Kleitman and his graduate student Eugene Aserinsky at the University of Chicago is one of those moments in science when the answer to a question turns out to be far stranger than the question itself. Aserinsky was monitoring his sleeping son's eye movements using equipment in the laboratory when he noticed that the eyes were making rapid, coordinated movements during certain periods of sleep, not the slow, drifting movements of deeper sleep, but something more like the active tracking movements of waking vision. When they woke sleepers during these episodes, they consistently reported vivid, narrative dreams. The discovery opened an entirely new understanding of sleep as an active state rather than a passive one, and initiated decades of research into what the sleeping brain is doing and why. Sleep needs shift across the lifespan in ways that are considerably more nuanced than the simple observation that adults need less sleep than babies. Newborns require between 14 and 17 hours of sleep per day, spending much of their sleeping time in what appears to be a developmental version of REM sleep, during which enormous amounts of neural construction and organization are taking place. Adolescents genuinely need between 8 and 10 hours, and the evidence suggests that most are chronically undersleeping. For adults, the range of 7 to 9 hours represents genuine physiological need, not a luxury. Older adults often report lighter sleep and more frequent waking, but the research suggests that sleep need does not substantially diminish with age. What changes is the ease of obtaining the sleep that is still needed. And in the sleeping brain, reorganizing the day's experiences, consolidating what was learned, clearing what accumulated, something is being made new again, quietly, in the dark. Just as something is being made new in every habit and behavior that is slowly, patiently, being changed. There is a claim so widely repeated that most people assume it must be true, that it takes 21 days to form a new habit. The figure appears in popular books, in corporate wellness programs, in the advice of well-meaning friends. It has the feeling of scientific precision without the substance of it. Its actual origin is an offhand observation made by a plastic surgeon named Maxwell Maltz, who noticed in the 1960s that patients who had undergone amputation typically took around 3 weeks to stop feeling a phantom limb. From this clinical observation, the 21-day figure migrated somehow into the popular understanding of habit formation, where it has remained, largely unchallenged, for decades. What research has actually found is considerably more variable and considerably more honest. A 2010 study conducted by Philippa Lally and colleagues at University College London tracked people attempting to establish new health-related behaviours and found that, on average, a new behaviour took 66 days before it was reported as automatic. The range across individuals, however, was striking, from as few as 18 days to as many as 254. Habit formation, it turns out, is not a fixed process that takes a fixed amount of time. It is a process that depends on the complexity of the behavior, the consistency with which it is practiced, the strength of competing habits, and individual differences in learning and neurology. The honest answer to how long it takes is, it varies, and it is usually longer than you think, and that is entirely fine. Behavioral scientists have observed something they call the fresh start effect, a consistently documented tendency for people to be more likely to initiate behavior change at the beginning of a new time unit, a new week, a new month, a new year, a new birthday. These temporal landmarks create what researchers describe as a psychological separation between one's current self and one's past self, a mental boundary that allows a person to feel that the old patterns belong to a previous chapter and that a new one is genuinely open. This is not mere sentimentality. The effect is real and measurable. The beginning of January generates significantly more gym memberships, dietary changes, and personal commitments than a randomly selected day in November. The arbitrary boundary of the calendar year does genuine psychological work, creating a felt sense of fresh beginning that supports the willingness to try. Identity plays a deeper role in lasting change than most accounts acknowledge. Research has found that people who approach behavioral change by first shifting their understanding of who they are, rather than by focusing exclusively on the desired outcome, tend to sustain the change more durably. The person who says, "I am someone who takes care of my body," maintains a new behavior differently from the person who says, "I am trying to exercise more." One is acting in accordance with the self-concept. The other is attempting to override a default. The first approach has the advantage that every instance of the behavior reinforces the identity, making the next instance more natural. The second requires renewed effort each time, drawing down on a reservoir of motivation that is not replenished by the behavior itself. The brain's relationship to old habits is one of the most important and most counterintuitive findings in behavioral neuroscience. Old patterns are not deleted when new ones form. They are suppressed, overridden by the stronger activation of newer pathways that have been built through consistent practice. But the old pathway remains. It can be reactivated under conditions that reduce the brain's available resources: stress, fatigue, illness, distraction. This is why someone who has successfully changed a pattern for months will sometimes find themselves reverting to the old behavior during a difficult period, apparently without intention and with considerable bewilderment. The reversion is not a failure. It is the brain doing what brains do under resource scarcity, defaulting to the most established and automatic response available. Understanding this makes the process of change more navigable. It means that the environment matters enormously, that removing the cues that trigger old patterns is not cheating but prudence, and that compassion toward oneself during setbacks is not weakness but accuracy. Rest in this context is not the opposite of change. It is a component of it. During deliberate rest, the brain consolidates recently acquired skills and behavioral patterns, integrating them into more stable and accessible neural structures. The musician who practices for an hour and then sleeps may find the following morning that the passage that resisted them the evening before has somehow clarified overnight. This is not magic. It is consolidation, the brain doing its organizational work in the quiet hours, making permanent what was only provisional. This means that the rest you are moving toward right now is not a pause in the process of becoming. It is part of the process itself. And from the patient, often invisible work of behavioral change, we move now into territory that is perhaps the most immediate and most personal of all. The territory of emotion, where change is felt most directly and most forcefully, and where the relationship between what we feel and who we are is most continuously, most intimately renegotiated. Most of us carry, without quite examining it, a picture of emotions as things that happen to us, feelings that arise from somewhere and then exist, fully formed until they pass. Fear, joy, grief, contentment, discrete states with clear edges, caused by the world and experienced by the self. The model is familiar and feels intuitively accurate, and it is, research increasingly suggests, only partially right. The psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett has proposed a theory of constructed emotion that challenges the older model at its foundation. In Barrett's account, emotions are not fixed, universal response patterns hardwired into the brain and triggered by specific situations. They are actively constructed, assembled in real time by the brain, from a combination of physiological signals from the body, predictions based on past experience, cultural concepts learned over a lifetime, and the particular context of the current moment. Two people experiencing identical external circumstances may construct very different emotions from those circumstances, depending on what their prior experience has given them as interpretive frameworks. And the same person, in the same situation at two different points in their life, may find that the emotion constructed is different from one occasion to the other, because they themselves are different. The physiological component of an emotion, when isolated from the layers of thought and narrative that typically surround it, turns out to be surprisingly brief. Research in affective neuroscience suggests that the pure physiological wave of an emotional response, the actual chemical and neural event, lasts less than 90 seconds. What extends an emotional experience beyond that brief initial wave is the mind's continued engagement with it, the story told about it, the attention directed toward it, the memories and associations called up by it, the anticipation of it recurring. The emotion as lived experience is always longer than the emotion as physiological event, and the difference is made by thought. Emotional regulation, the capacity to manage and modulate one's emotional responses rather than simply being swept along by them, is not a fixed trait that one either has or lacks. It is a learnable skill developed through practice. Mindfulness-based practices, which train the capacity to observe emotional experience without immediately reacting to it, have been associated with improved emotional flexibility across numerous studies. Cognitive reappraisal, the practice of actively reconsidering the meaning or significance of an event rather than accepting one's initial interpretation as final, has been found to reduce the intensity and duration of negative emotional experiences. Acceptance-based approaches, which train the capacity to hold difficult emotion without fighting it or suppressing it, tend to reduce the secondary suffering that comes from the struggle against feeling. None of these is a way of eliminating difficult emotion. All of them are ways of changing one's relationship to it. The research literature on post-traumatic growth describes something that does not fit easily into the common narrative about suffering. That some people who experience significant adversity, loss, illness, or trauma report meaningful positive changes in its aftermath. These changes are not uniformly present, and they do not cancel the suffering that preceded them. But they are real and documented. Greater reported sense of personal strength. Deeper appreciation for ordinary moments of life. Richer and more intentional relationships. An expanded sense of what is actually possible for the self. The mechanism is not the adversity itself, but the active process of making sense of it, building a new understanding of oneself and the world that can contain and integrate the experience. Change of this kind does not arrive quickly. It is worked for, over time, in the ongoing process of trying to understand what has happened and who one is in its wake. The hedonic treadmill describes one of the most consistently observed findings in the psychology of well-being. that after positive or negative life events, most people return, over time, to a relatively stable baseline level of well-being. The major achievement, the devastating loss, the unexpected windfall, all produce less lasting effect on how a person feels day to day than the person before the event anticipated they would. People tend to overestimate how long they will feel the effects of both good and bad changes. This is not to say that nothing changes in the wake of significant events. Much does. But the hedonic register, the felt sense of how things are, has a remarkable capacity for restoration, for returning to the level it regards as ordinary. The Japanese concept of mono no aware, which might be translated as the pathos of things, or a bittersweet awareness of impermanence, describes an emotional orientation that is almost the opposite of the hedonic treadmill's implied resistance to lasting change. Mono no aware is the gentle sadness and deep appreciation that arise simultaneously when one fully recognizes that something beautiful or precious will not last. The cherry blossom is treasured in Japanese culture, partly because it is so brief, 2 weeks of bloom and then release, a generosity as delicate as it is total. To feel mono no aware is not to be overwhelmed by loss. It is to be moved by beauty precisely because beauty is temporary, and to allow that movement to fully register rather than being managed away. It is one of the oldest and most carefully described ways of being in the presence of change without either denying it or being undone by it. And from the inner landscape of emotion, where change is felt with such immediacy and such complexity, we move now outward into the world of language, where change is recorded, argued about, resisted, and ultimately, always, carried forward. Language is one of the most intimate and least noticed expressions of collective change. It is always changing, in every direction at once, through every medium and every generation, and largely without the permission of the people who use it. Linguists, who study language the way geologists study rock, observe this process with something like fond resignation. The forces that drive linguistic change are as natural and as unstoppable as the forces that drive continental drift, and attempts to halt or reverse them have a comparable rate of success. Every living language in use today is in a meaningfully different state from the language of 100 years ago. New words have been coined, old ones have shifted meaning. Grammatical structures have loosened or tightened, pronunciation has drifted, and new patterns of expression have replaced older ones. In most cases, the speakers of a language do not notice this happening, any more than a person notices the slow shift of a river's course from day to day. The change is continuous and gradual, and it becomes visible only when a historical sample is placed next to a contemporary one. The word nice offers a particularly instructive journey through the history of semantic change. When it entered English from Old French in the 13th century, it meant foolish or ignorant. Over the following centuries, it moved through a sequence of meanings that would be unrecognizable to the word's current users: lascivious, extravagant, fussy, precise, careful. By the 18th century, it had arrived at something close to its modern sense of pleasant or agreeable. Nothing guided this journey. No committee voted on each stage. The shifts accumulated through millions of individual uses, each speaker drawing on the word's available associations and bending them slightly toward the meaning they needed, and the meaning drifted along, generation by generation, until the word that meant foolish had become a word for something kindly. Linguists give a name to the direction in which a word's meaning shifts over time. When a word becomes more positive, the process is called amelioration. When it becomes more negative, it is called pejoration. The word villain, now strongly pejorative, simply meant a person who worked on a feudal estate, a farm worker. As the ruling class of the Middle Ages encoded their social attitudes into the language they used, the word accumulated the connotations of rough manners and bad character and eventually arrived, via several centuries of class prejudice, at its current meaning. The change is not just linguistic history. It is social history, preserved in the everyday words that speakers use without examining their archaeology. The situation of many of the world's languages is among the most quietly significant changes occurring in human culture today. Of the approximately 7,000 languages currently spoken on Earth, linguists estimate that roughly half are endangered, meaning they are no longer being transmitted to children as first languages. When a language is no longer being learned by children, its time as a living system is limited to the lifespans of its remaining speakers. When the last native speaker of a language dies, that language is considered extinct. With it go not just a collection of words and grammar rules, but an entire way of organizing experience, a set of distinctions and emphases, and ways of attending to the world that existed nowhere else and will not exist again. Languages do not simply contain culture. They are partly constitutive of it, shaping what can be expressed and therefore what can be noticed. New words enter languages constantly. The Oxford English Dictionary adds hundreds of new words and revised meanings each quarter, an ongoing editorial effort to capture a living language in the act of becoming. Languages have always absorbed new vocabulary from the circumstances that produced new things requiring names. And they have always borrowed from each other. English, which began as a Germanic language carried to Britain by Anglo-Saxon settlers in the 5th century, subsequently absorbed enormous amounts of vocabulary from the Old Norse of Viking settlers, from the Norman French of the 11th century conquest, from the Latin of the church and scholarship, and from the languages of every trade partner, colonial encounter, and wave of immigration that followed. Roughly 60% of Common English vocabulary has Romance language origins, mostly Latin and French. The language one speaks in is always a palimpsest, a surface on which many histories have been written, each partially covering the ones beneath, all of them still faintly legible if one knows where to look. And from the changing words through which human beings have tried to name the world, we move now to the world itself, where the oldest and most patient changes of all are quietly, continuously unfolding. There is a quality to geological time that is almost impossible for the human mind to genuinely inhabit. Not intellectually, one can comprehend the numbers well enough, but imaginatively, experientially, the felt sense of what 10 million years means, what 100 million years contains, what 5 billion years has room for, this resists the imagination almost completely. The human nervous system evolved to care about what will happen in the next few minutes, hours, seasons, years. It did not evolve to feel the span of deep time as a living reality, and yet the landscape one moves through is almost entirely a product of processes operating on exactly those scales. And to understand it at all, requires at least an attempt to stretch the mind toward a different relationship with time. The Himalayas, the highest mountain range on Earth, are among the youngest mountains geologically, having begun to form approximately 50 million years ago, when the northward moving Indian tectonic plate began to collide with the Eurasian plate. Both plates carry continental crust, which is too buoyant to subduct under another continental plate. And so, the collision produced an enormous crumpling and thickening of the crust. The rock that now forms the Himalayas was originally the sea floor between the two ancient continents, pushed upward and folded over itself as the collision slowly proceeded. This collision has not ended. The Himalayas are still rising, pushed upward by the continuing compression of the two plates, at a rate of approximately 5 millimeters per year. At the same time, erosion by wind, water, and frost is continuously wearing the peaks down. The mountains are in a balance between these opposing forces, never quite the same height from one decade to the next. Iceland sits in one of the most geologically active locations on Earth, positioned directly atop the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, the underwater mountain range that marks the boundary between the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates. These two plates are slowly separating, pulled apart by the convection currents of the mantle beneath them. As they separate, magma wells up from below to fill the gap, creating new volcanic rock. Iceland is the most prominent section of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge that stands above sea level, and the island grows slightly wider by approximately 2.5 centimeters per year as the plates continue to diverge. The volcanic landscape of Iceland, with its geysers and lava fields and hot springs, is not evidence of unusual instability. It is simply the surface of the planet's interior being made visible. The Grand Canyon cuts through the Colorado Plateau in the southwestern United States as one of the most dramatic exposures of geological time on Earth. The canyon began forming approximately 5 to 6 million years ago as the Colorado River established its current course and began cutting downward through the layered sedimentary rock of the plateau. The river's work over those millions of years has exposed layers of rock representing an extraordinary span of time. The youngest rocks at the rim are approximately 270 million years old, and the oldest exposed at the inner gorge, dark metamorphic rocks called the Vishnu Basement Rocks, are approximately 1.8 billion years old. The canyon is not only a landscape feature, it is an open book, reading upward from very nearly the beginning of complex life on Earth to a period that feels, by geological standards, almost recent. 20,000 years ago, the world's coastlines looked entirely different from the ones mapped today. At the height of the last glacial maximum, so much of Earth's water was locked in continental ice sheets that global sea levels were approximately 120 meters lower than they are now. Large areas of what are now shallow continental shelves were exposed as dry land. Britain and mainland Europe were connected by a broad plain crossing what is now the southern North Sea. Southeast Asia was connected to the islands of Borneo and Java by dry land. North America and Asia were linked by a wide land bridge across what is now the Bering Strait. The ancestors of the first people to reach the Americas walked across that bridge. When the ice sheets began to retreat, roughly 15,000 years ago, meltwater poured into the oceans and sea levels rose, flooding these connections and creating the coastlines that exist today. The boundaries we take as fundamental, the edges of continents, the limits of islands, were different before and will be different again. Soil is perhaps the most underestimated product of geological time. The thin layer of living material that covers much of Earth's land surface and makes terrestrial agriculture possible is the result of the extremely slow interaction of bedrock weathering, organic matter accumulation, water movement, and biological activity. Natural processes require an estimated 200 to 1,000 years to produce just 1 centimeter of topsoil. The layer of soil that might be an arm's length deep in a fertile field represents, at the conservative end, many thousands of years of accumulation. It is one of the resources most taken for granted in ordinary life, and one of the slowest to recover once lost. From the vast, slow changes of stone and water and the cycling of entire oceans, we move now to the largest scale of all. The changes occurring in the cosmos itself, in the stars and galaxies, and the great expanding space that contains them. If you stepped outside tonight and stood somewhere truly dark, far from city lights, and tilted your head back to look at the sky, you would be looking into time as much as into space. The light reaching your eyes from those distant points has been traveling for years and decades, and in some cases centuries, before arriving at this particular moment on this particular night. You are not seeing the stars as they are. You are seeing them as they were at the moment the light you are receiving was released. The night sky is a record of the past, arriving continuously in the present, mixed together without distinction between what is near and what is far, what is recent and what is ancient. The sun, around which the Earth and all the other planets of the solar system orbit, is approximately 4.5 billion years old and is roughly halfway through its expected lifespan. It is not a fixed and unchanging object, though on human timescales it appears so. The sun has been very gradually brightening over its lifetime as the proportion of helium relative to hydrogen in its core increases, and the nuclear reactions that produce its energy adjust accordingly. It is estimated to have brightened by approximately 30% since the solar system formed, a change so slow as to be entirely imperceptible across any span of human history. In the very long term, this brightening will have consequences for the planets it warms. In approximately 1 to 2 billion years, the sun will be bright enough that Earth's surface temperatures will exceed the range that current life requires. But this belongs to a timescale so remote that it functions as a fact about the nature of things rather than a cause for concern. Edwin Hubble's discovery in 1929 that distant galaxies are moving away from each other was one of the most consequential astronomical findings in history. What he observed was not simply that distant objects are receding, it was that the more distant the galaxy, the faster the recession, a pattern consistent with the space between galaxies expanding. The universe, it became clear, was not a static vessel containing moving objects. It was itself expanding, growing larger over time, carrying everything within it, apart from everything else. This expansion, which began approximately 13.8 billion years ago with what cosmologists call the Big Bang, has not been slowing down as one might expect gravity to cause it to. Observations made in the late 1990s found, to widespread astonishment, that the expansion is actually accelerating. The cause of this acceleration remains one of the great open questions in physics. The placeholder name given to whatever is driving it is dark energy. The Milky Way, the galaxy containing the solar system, and the neighboring Andromeda galaxy are the two largest members of what astronomers call the local group. Both are large spiral galaxies of broadly comparable size, though Andromeda is somewhat larger, and they are approaching each other. Due to the mutual gravitational attraction between them, the two galaxies are on a collision course and are expected to begin their merger in approximately 4.5 billion years. The collision of two galaxies is not the catastrophic smashing of objects that the word collision might suggest. The stars within each galaxy are so enormously far apart relative to their own sizes that the probability of any two stars actually colliding during the galactic merger is extremely low. What happens instead is a gravitational encounter of extraordinary complexity, the two galaxies interpenetrating and distorting each other, their stars flung into new orbits, the orderly spiral structures disrupted and eventually resolving over hundreds of millions of years into a new configuration. The Moon, that familiar companion of Earth's nights, is not where it has always been. Gravitational interactions between the Earth and the Moon create tidal friction, and this friction is very slowly transferring angular momentum from Earth's rotation to the Moon's orbit. The practical effect is that the Moon moves approximately 3.8 centimeters farther from Earth each year. At the time the Moon first formed, approximately 4.5 billion years ago, it was vastly closer to Earth, and Earth's rotation was correspondingly faster. A day may have been as short as 6 hours. Over the immensity of geological time, the Moon has moved to its current distance, and the Earth's rotation has slowed to its current rate, and both processes continue imperceptibly every day. The atoms that constitute the body you are resting in right now, the carbon in your cells, the oxygen in your blood, the calcium in your bones, the iron that carries oxygen through your blood, were forged in the interiors of stars that no longer exist. The universe that emerged from the Big Bang contained almost exclusively hydrogen and helium. Heavier elements, everything in the periodic table beyond lithium, were produced through the nuclear reactions occurring in the cores of stars, where the temperatures and pressures are sufficient to fuse lighter elements into heavier ones. When those stars ended their lives, they scattered these elements into space through stellar winds and supernova explosions. The material drifted through space for billions of years before being gathered by gravity into the cloud of gas and dust that became the solar system, and then into the planets, and then, on this particular planet, into living things. The atoms in your body have been part of stars. They have drifted through interstellar space. They have been rearranged by billions of years of planetary and biological chemistry into the particular configuration that is you, resting here in the quiet of this night. From the oldest and most expansive change of all, the ongoing transformation of the cosmos itself, we come now back to the most human scale, to the particular shape that change takes within the bonds and communities that human beings make with each other across a lifetime. The bonds formed between human beings are among the most complex and most mutable forms of connection in nature. They are subject to all the same forces of change that operate everywhere else, complicated by the fact that both parties are simultaneously changing, not always at the same rate or in the same direction, and that the relationship between them is itself a thing that changes independently of either person alone. The foundational research on attachment, the deep emotional bond between infants and their primary caregivers, was conducted in the middle decades of the 20th century by John Bowlby, a British psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, and Mary Ainsworth, a developmental psychologist who developed the methods that made the attachment patterns Bowlby described observable and measurable. What their work established was that the quality of early attachment has lasting effects on how a person relates to others across their life, shaping expectations about whether others are reliably available, whether one is worthy of care, and how to manage the vulnerability that intimacy requires. These early patterns, laid down in the years before memory is fully functional, tend to persist. But subsequent research has been equally important in demonstrating that they are not fixed. New relationships, particularly those that are sustained, sensitive, and reliable over time, can reshape these early patterns. Therapeutic relationships have been associated with measurable changes in attachment style. People who begin their adult lives with anxious or avoidant patterns of relating can, through experience, develop greater security. The early patterns are not destiny, they are a starting point. Friendship, that voluntary and often undervalued form of connection, changes its nature considerably across the span of a life. In childhood and early adolescence, friendships are often formed through proximity and shared activity. The children who live nearby, who attend the same school, who happen to be in the same place at the same time. In later adulthood, as geographic mobility and the demands of work and family narrow the time available for new connection, friendships become increasingly intentional. The relationships that survive are those that both people actively choose to maintain, despite the absence of the convenience that originally brought them together. Research on long-term friendship suggests that this shift toward intentionality, while it often means that fewer friendships are maintained, tends to deepen the ones that endure. The friend one has at 60 is usually there for different reasons than the friend one had at 10. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed, based on studies of social group sizes across primate species and human societies, that humans have a cognitive capacity for maintaining stable social relationships up to approximately 150 people. This outer layer of acquaintance contains within it a smaller circle of closer relationships, and within that, a still smaller inner circle of intimate connection. The specific individuals within each layer change throughout a lifetime, sometimes gradually and sometimes suddenly. But the structural size of the layers remains relatively consistent. What this suggests is that the human capacity for connection is not unlimited, but is also not small. The typical person moves through a lifetime maintaining, at any given time, a complex social world of considerable scope, even as its specific inhabitants change. Communities that experience shared difficulty sometimes show a counterintuitive response. Studies of communities affected by natural disasters, prolonged collective hardship, or sudden shared adversity have documented what some researchers call the altruistic community, a temporary but striking increase in social cohesion, mutual aid, and collective efficacy that can emerge in the aftermath of crisis. People who would not normally interact find common ground in the shared experience. boundaries that ordinarily separate neighbors or strangers become permeable. The crisis changes the social landscape in ways that, at least for a time, reveal capacities for connection and generosity that were always present but rarely visible in ordinary circumstances. Margaret Mead, one of the most influential cultural anthropologists of the 20th century, observed something about the rate of cultural change in the modern era that she considered genuinely unprecedented. Throughout most of human history, the knowledge and skills a generation needed to navigate adult life were transmitted primarily from older to younger, from people with experience to people without it. But the pace of technological, social, and economic change in the 20th century became so rapid that the reverse began occurring regularly. Younger people found themselves more fluent in new developments than their parents and grandparents, and the direction of knowledge transfer began to reverse. Children became teachers of their elders in ways that had no precedent. This reversal in the direction of cultural transmission is itself one of the most significant changes of the modern era, reshaping the relationship between generations and the experience of authority, of knowledge, and of who is considered to know what about how the world works. And from the way change moves between people and communities, altering the texture of collective life, we arrive now at the most intimate encounter with change of all. The way it moves through a single human life, from beginning to end, shaping and reshaping the person at its center. A human life is the longest and most complex change process most people will ever personally observe. From the first cell division of a fertilized egg to the last breath, it is change from one end to the other, accelerating in some periods and appearing to slow in others, but never actually stopping, never holding still long enough to be definitively grasped. And one of the things that makes a human life so difficult to understand from inside it is that one is always already somewhere in the middle, without a stable vantage point from which to see the whole. Erik Erikson, the German-American developmental psychologist and psychoanalyst, proposed a framework for understanding the human lifespan that organized it into 8 stages, each defined by a central psychological tension that the person works, in that period, to resolve. The infant navigates the tension between trust and mistrust, depending on whether the world proves reliable. The child moves through questions of autonomy, initiative, and industry. The adolescent encounters the question of identity with particular intensity. The young adult faces the challenge of intimacy. The middle-aged adult grapples with what Erikson called generativity, the concern for establishing and guiding the next generation. The older adult faces the question of integrity versus despair, whether the life as lived, with all its choices and compromises and unfulfilled directions, can be accepted as one's own. In Erikson's framework, development is never complete. It is a lifelong process of engagement with questions that do not have final answers, only ongoing negotiations. The psychologist Dan McAdams has extended this understanding with a framework centered on what he calls the personal narrative. Adults, McAdams has argued, understand themselves not only through momentary experience, but through the ongoing story they construct about who they have been, who they are now, and who they might become. This story is not fixed. It is continually revised as new experiences are incorporated, as the meaning of past events is reinterpreted in light of present understanding, as anticipated futures are adjusted. The self, in McAdams's account, is not a thing that changes. It is a story that is being told, and the telling is the thing. The act of narrating a life is the act of making a self, and it is a project without a final draft. William James, in 1890, wrote in a passage that has since been used to support a view he probably did not intend as absolute. That character is set like plaster by the age of 30. He meant something more specific than the generalization has often been taken to imply. But the view that personality is essentially fixed in early adulthood became widespread and remained influential for much of the 20th century. Subsequent decades of large-scale longitudinal research have largely contradicted it. Personality continues to change throughout adulthood, and not randomly. The broad direction of adult personality change, across cultures and across individuals, tends toward what researchers call the maturity principle. People generally become, on average, more emotionally stable, more conscientious, and more agreeable with age. This is not a guarantee, and it is not universal. But the broad trend is robust and well documented. Character is not set like plaster. It continues to be worked, like wood. What is sometimes called a midlife crisis, and what researchers more carefully describe as a midlife reassessment, is a genuine and documented psychological phenomenon. Many people in their 40s and 50s engage in what might be understood as a life review, a stock-taking in which the life actually lived is compared, often for the first time with real honesty, to the values, hopes, and self-images of an earlier period. This comparison frequently reveals gaps, choices made in youth for reasons that no longer apply, directions not taken that now seem significant. This review can be disorienting, even painful, but it is also often productive, leading to what many people describe as a meaningful reordering of priorities, a shedding of what was carried for the wrong reasons, and a renewed investment in what turns out to actually matter. The midlife reassessment is not a crisis, except in the original sense of the word. A turning point, a moment when things that were previously going in one direction may begin going in another. Grief, as a form of change, deserves its own recognition here. Contemporary grief research, largely departing from older stage-based models, increasingly understands grief not as a process of moving through defined stages toward resolution, but as a gradual integration of loss into a continuing life. The loss does not disappear, and the person does not simply recover from it and return to who they were before. They become someone for whom this loss is part of who they are, carried forward as an altered relationship with the person or thing that was lost, present in new forms, sometimes speaking clearly and sometimes quietly, but not gone. This understanding of grief as carrying forward rather than leaving behind captures something that many people who have grieved deeply recognize as true to their experience: that the dead are not absent. They are differently present, and that presence changes over time, becoming something that can be lived with and even, in its way, being grateful for. Retirement is among the most structurally significant transitions most adults in modern industrial societies will experience. It involves simultaneous shifts in identity. Who am I if not my work? In daily rhythm, what does a day contain when it is no longer organized by work's demands? In social connection, much of which, for many people, has been woven through work. And in purpose, what am I for? Research on the quality of this transition finds that it depends substantially on whether the person has, over the course of their working life, cultivated meaning and connection that is independent of work itself. Those who have tended to navigate the transition more easily, those for whom work was the primary or sole source of meaning, identity, and connection, tend to find it harder. The transition asks a question that working life often postpones. Who are you when you are not what you do? And from the long arc of a single human life, with all its seasons and reassessments and quiet continuations, we arrive at last at the place where all these currents of change come together. The quiet understanding that change, in its deepest nature, is not dramatic. It is ordinary. It is the texture of everything. And it is in attending to that texture that something unexpected tends to be found. The most important changes are almost never the ones that feel like changes at the moment they are happening. This is one of the quietest and most reliable discoveries that attentiveness to the world tends to produce. The tree does not feel itself growing. The coastline does not register the retreating water. The sleeping child does not know that their brain is reorganizing everything it learned that day into something more durable and more available. The person who is slowly, incrementally, becoming more patient, or more compassionate, or more settled in their own skin, does not feel it happening. Change of this kind becomes visible only in retrospect, when what was before can be held up against what is now and the distance between them observed. This has a consequence that is worth sitting with for a moment. If the most significant changes are largely invisible as they occur, then the feeling that nothing is changing is not evidence that nothing is changing. It is simply the normal phenomenology of change from the inside. The river does not feel itself shifting. The stone does not feel itself wearing smooth. The person in the middle of a slow and important transformation feels mostly ordinary, mostly the same, mostly stuck, right up until the moment when they notice, with some surprise, that they are not where they were. Psychologists have studied the human difficulty with noticing change in a different context, one that reveals something fundamental about how the brain handles visual information. Change blindness is the striking experimental finding that people fail to notice large changes to a visual scene when those changes occur during a brief interruption to their attention, a momentary cut in a film, a blink, a slight distraction. A person in a scene can be replaced by a different person. The color of a wall can change. An object can appear or disappear. And observers, watching carefully and asked to notice changes, miss these alterations at surprisingly high rates. The brain, it turns out, does not maintain a detailed, continuously updated representation of everything in its visual field. It maintains something much sparser, filling in the gaps with assumptions and expectations. Noticing a change requires attending to the thing that changed. Without that attention, the change occurs in a kind of blind spot. Something related happens with subjective time. Researchers studying how people experience and remember the passage of time have found that novel, unfamiliar experiences generate more distinct memories than familiar, routine ones. A week spent somewhere new, doing unfamiliar things, encountering unexpected situations, tends to feel longer in retrospect than a month of routine. because the novel week generated more individual memories, and the month of routine left fewer distinct impressions. This means that the texture of change, the felt sense of a life that has moved and varied and offered genuinely new experiences, is partly a matter of memory density. How many distinct moments the week contained. Familiarity, while often comfortable, tends to compress time. Novelty, while sometimes uncomfortable, tends to expand it. The strange and the unfamiliar are slow. The routine is fast. The word change itself, tracing back through centuries of language, carries an origin that is surprisingly concrete. It moves through Old French changer to the Latin cambia, meaning to exchange or to barter. At its etymological root, change is not loss, it is not gain. It is an exchange, something offered, something received. The thing that was is given over, and in its place, something arrives that was not there before. This is not always easy, even when the exchange is ultimately a good one. What is given over was real. It mattered. It is right that its passing be noticed and even mourned. And what arrives in its place deserves to be genuinely received rather than merely accepted under protest. In the Zen tradition, the concept of ichigo ichie, sometimes written with the characters for one time, one meeting, describes the understanding that each encounter, each moment, each experience is unrepeatable, not in a melancholy sense, in the sense of an invitation. This conversation, this evening, this particular quality of light in this particular room at this particular hour will not occur again. The same factors will not converge in the same way. The person you are now is not quite the person you were a year ago or even a week ago, and the meeting between who you are now and what is here now is therefore a meeting that is happening exactly once in this moment before change carries both of them onward. What the Zen tradition invites with Ichigo Ichi is not nostalgia or grief, but presence. Not the effort to freeze what is flowing, but the willingness to be fully in contact with it for the time that it lasts. The cherry blossom is not more beautiful despite the fact that it is brief. It is more beautiful partly because it is brief, and because attending to it fully, receiving it without reservation, is the appropriate response to something that will not come again. This, perhaps, is what the long consideration of change finally arrives at. Not a philosophy of loss, not a catalogue of what passes, not an argument for or against permanence, but something more like an instruction. Pay attention, not because everything is about to disappear, though it is slowly, in the way that everything is, but because what is here, right now, in this room, in this body, in this quiet moment at the edge of sleep, is particular. It is specific. It is the result of an extraordinary convergence of a great many things, many of which have been described tonight, and which will not quite converge in this exact way again. The atoms were once inside stars. The body is continuously renewing itself. The brain is changed by every experience it has. The words being listened to carry the accumulated weight of more than 2,000 years of contemplative attention. And the moment, this moment, is doing what every moment does. It is already beginning to become the next one. And the awareness of that, when it is gentle rather than anxious, when it is curious rather than fearful, when it is met with the same quality of patient attention that a monk brings to a broom in the hour before dawn, tends to produce something that is not quite like any other feeling in the world. it tends to produce something very much like rest. And from that rest, which is not the absence of change but the willingness to be at peace inside it, sleep can come. Naturally, easily, as it always has. As we come gently to the end of this long, unhurried journey through change, let the whole of it settle for a moment before it fades. There is no need to hold any of it carefully. The mind will keep what it needs. It always does. We traveled a great distance tonight, and yet we did not go anywhere dramatic. We moved through ancient monasteries where the recognition of impermanence was understood not as a doctrine, but as something to be directly felt in the body. We sat with the Greek philosophers and the Chinese sages and the Stoics and the Taoists, all of them turning the same question from different angles, arriving at different words for something that resisted final definition. We watched rivers shift their courses across floodplains over centuries, and bamboo rise almost a meter in a single day, and the Sahara hold within its sand dunes the memory of lakes and rivers and people swimming. We moved inside the body and found it not fixed but continuously, quietly renewing itself, its stomach lining, its bones, its blood, its outermost skin, all of it in a state of patient, unhurried replacement that never stops. We visited the sleeping brain, washing itself clean in the dark, consolidating what the day offered, making more permanent what had only just arrived. We listened to language shifting over centuries, one word becoming something it never meant to be, an entire vocabulary carrying the compressed weight of history in its most ordinary syllables. We stood at the edge of geological time and looked down into a canyon whose oldest visible stones were formed nearly 2 billion years ago, and then looked up and found that the atoms in the body standing there were older still. We followed change through the bonds between people, through the long arc of a single human life, through grief and through growth, and through the particular kind of reassessment that arrives in the middle of things, when the life that has been lived meets the life that was imagined, and the two look at each other honestly for perhaps the first time. And beneath all of it, threading through every cluster and every image and every fact that found its way into this night, was the same quiet understanding that the Buddhist traditions arrived at, and the river demonstrates, and the sleeping body enacts without effort. That change is not the interruption of things. It is the substance of things. It is what things are made of, all the way down, and the resistance to it is the only part that is hard. There is something that happens when this is genuinely absorbed that is difficult to describe. Not resignation, something more like the relief that comes from setting down something very heavy that one had been carrying for so long that one had forgotten it was there. The wish that things would stay still, that the ground would hold, that the people one loves would not be altered by time, that the self would remain recognizable from year to year. This wish is entirely understandable, and it is also always working against the current. And what change, approached with patience and without anxiety, eventually asks is whether it might be possible to turn and go with the current instead. To find, in the flowing, not loss, but a kind of freedom. Not the freedom of permanence, which nothing can offer, but the freedom of presence, which the current moment is always already providing, to anyone willing to actually inhabit it. You have been inhabiting it tonight, quietly, without effort. simply by being here and listening and letting the hours do what hours do. If these slow evenings with the sleepy mind are something you find worth returning to, you are warmly welcome to leave a like or to subscribe or to leave a quiet thought in the comments below. It helps more tired and curious minds find their way here, one unhurried night at a time. This channel exists because of the people who find something worth returning to in these gentle, unhurried hours together. And if sleep has not yet arrived, there is another quiet journey waiting for you nearby. Another door into a slow world, ready whenever you are. But if your eyes are heavy now, let them close. Let the whole of tonight, the rivers and the stars, and the ancient sand and the renewing cells, and the words that have been shifting their meanings for centuries, let all of it soften and recede the way a sound recedes when you stop attending to it. Not disappearing, simply becoming background, becoming the texture of the quiet rather than the thing you are listening to. Let your shoulders release whatever they have been holding. Let your jaw unclench. Let your hands rest exactly where they are, without needing to hold anything. Let your breath find its own pace, the pace it has always known, the one it does not need your help to maintain. You do not need to remember any of what you heard tonight. You do not need to carry it forward consciously, or file it away, or do anything at all with it. The river will continue without your supervision. The bones will continue to remake themselves. The brain will do its quiet work in the hours ahead. And you, for now, are simply asked to rest inside the only moment that exists, which is this one, and which is already, gently, becoming the next. Change will continue as it always has, patient and unhurried and entirely without drama. And you, resting inside it, are already exactly where you need to be. Sleep well and good night.